The small town of Mill Creek was known for its serene landscapes and close-knit community. Nestled between dense forests and rolling hills, it was a place where everyone knew everyone. The Hartleys were no exception. Sarah Hartley, a devoted mother and widow, lived in a modest house with her 10-year-old daughter, Emma. Life was simple but fulfilling, until the night everything changed. It was a crisp autumn evening. The air was thick with the scent of pine and wood smoke as Sarah tucked Emma into bed, her eyes twinkling with stories of fairies and enchanted forests. Emma, with her golden curls and innocent smile, was the light of Sarah's life. As she kissed her daughter's forehead, Sarah felt an unexplainable chill run down her spine, but she brushed it off as fatigue. Later that night, Sarah was awakened by an eerie silence. The usual sounds of the night, crickets chirping, the distant hoot of an owl, were absent. As she made her way to Emma's room, a strange light filtered through the window, casting an unnatural glow. Her heart pounded in her chest as she opened the door to find Emma's bed empty, the window wide open, and a peculiar humming sound growing fainter by the second. Panic surged through Sarah as she frantically called out for Emma, her voice echoing through the night. She raced outside, her bare feet sinking into the damp grass, eyes scanning the skies. She saw a faint, saucer-like object disappearing into the clouds. Desperation turned into determination as she vowed to find her daughter, no matter the cost. The police were skeptical, dismissing Sarah's claims of an alien abduction as the ravings of a distraught mother. The townspeople offered sympathy but little else. Refusing to give up, Sarah turned to the local library, poring over books on extraterrestrial phenomena, government cover-ups, and UFO sightings. Her nights were spent mapping out locations of reported abductions, her mind a whirl of conspiracy theories and half-baked plans. Weeks turned into months with no sign of Emma. Just as hope seemed to fade, a mysterious stranger appeared in Mill Creek. He was an older man with piercing blue eyes and a haunted expression. Introducing himself as Dr. Edward Clark, a former astrophysicist turned ufologist, he claimed to have information about Emma's abduction. Dr. Clark told Sarah about a secret government facility known as Area S, where abductees were supposedly taken for experiments. He shared stories of his own encounters with extraterrestrial beings and presented evidence that pointed to Mill Creek as a hotspot for alien activity. Desperate and with nothing left to lose, Sarah decided to trust him. Sarah and Dr. Clark embarked on a perilous journey to Area S, navigating treacherous terrain and avoiding government patrols. As they drew closer, Sarah's resolve grew stronger, fueled by the belief that Emma was still alive. They finally reached the outskirts of the facility, a sprawling complex shrouded in secrecy and heavily guarded. Under the cover of darkness, they infiltrated the facility, using Dr. Clark's insider knowledge to bypass security. Inside, the sight that greeted them was beyond comprehension: rows of containment units holding humans in suspended animation, strange machines emitting otherworldly lights, and scientists conducting bizarre experiments. In the deepest recesses of Area S, Sarah found Emma. She was lying unconscious in a sterile chamber, surrounded by advanced technology. Overwhelmed with emotion, Sarah fought back tears as she disabled the chamber and cradled her daughter in her arms. Dr. Clark, meanwhile, was gathering evidence to expose the facility to the world. As they made their escape, alarms blared and guards closed in. A high-speed chase ensued, with Sarah driving recklessly through the desert night, determined to keep Emma safe. They managed to lose their pursuers and found refuge in an abandoned cabin. Back in Mill Creek, Emma gradually recovered, though the experience left her with fragmented memories and occasional nightmares. Sarah, now a fierce advocate for uncovering the truth, worked tirelessly with Dr. Clark to expose the horrors of Area S. Their story attracted media attention, leading to public outcry and government investigations. Though the journey had been harrowing, Sarah's love for her daughter had never wavered. Together, they began to heal, finding solace in each other and the hope that their ordeal would prevent others from suffering the same fate. Years later, Sarah and Emma moved to a new town, seeking a fresh start. The trauma of the past lingered, but their bond had only grown stronger. Sarah often gazed at the night sky, a mix of fear and wonder in her heart, knowing that they were not alone in the universe. But no matter what came their way, she knew she would always protect her daughter, even if it meant facing the unknown once more. I'd always loved the quiet serenity of Mill Hollow, a small town nestled in the heart of nowhere. Life here was simple, predictable, and unchanging, until the shadows came. It started with subtle things, people acting a little off, like Mayor Jenkins suddenly forgetting his own address or Mrs. Harper, our postwoman, delivering mail at midnight. Small town quirks, I thought. I wish I'd been right. My name is Alex Porter, and I'm a mechanic by trade. For the past 10 years, I've fixed everything from old Fords to the town's only fire truck. Life was good, quiet. Then, a month ago, I noticed something truly unsettling. People weren't just acting odd, they were different. It was in their eyes, an emptiness, a hollowness that seemed to swallow their humanity. I was working late one night, trying to fix Mr. Thompson's ancient tractor, when I heard a noise outside my garage. At first, I thought it was a raccoon, but as I walked towards the door, wrench in hand, I saw him. Paul, the town drunk, or at least what used to be Paul. He was standing unnaturally still, his eyes locked onto mine, devoid of any recognition or warmth. "Paul. You okay, man?" I asked, stepping closer. He didn't respond, just tilted his head in an eerie, unnatural way. That's when I saw the black ooze dripping from his mouth, like some kind of foul oil. My heart pounded in my chest as I stumbled back. Suddenly, he lunged at me with a speed and strength I'd never seen. I barely dodged, the wrench slipping from my sweaty grip as I ran into the garage, slamming the door shut behind me. I spent the next few days in hiding, watching from the shadows as more and more townspeople changed. They moved differently, their actions stiff and robotic. Every night, the same black ooze would seep from their mouths, staining the sidewalks. I knew I couldn't stay hidden forever. I needed answers. I ventured out during the day, blending in as best I could. I kept to myself, eyes down, hoping the thing that used to be Sheriff Miller wouldn't notice my trembling hands. I saw them, the infected, communicating in a series of low, guttural sounds, the kind that made my skin crawl. I needed to find someone, anyone who was still human. One night, I broke into the library, hoping to find some records, some clue as to what was happening. As I sifted through old newspapers and journals, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I turned around and there she was. Linda, the librarian. Her eyes, now pools of darkness, stared through me. "Alex, what are you doing here?" she asked, her voice a perfect imitation of the Linda I once knew. "Just looking for a book," I stammered, edging towards the exit. "We have all the information you need," she replied, taking a step closer. Her hand, glistening with the black ooze, reached out to me. I ran. I bolted from the library, hearing her screeching behind me, a sound that echoed in my nightmares for days. In my desperation, I found refuge in the abandoned church on the edge of town. It was there I met Dr. Whitaker, a retired biologist who'd been researching the strange occurrences in secret. He showed me his notes, his theories about an alien parasite that took over human hosts, consuming their minds and bodies. "They're like a hive mind," he explained, eyes wide with fear. "Once they infect a host, they become part of a collective consciousness. The black ooze is some kind of biological transmitter." "But why Mill Hollow?" I asked, trying to make sense of the horror. "I don't know," he admitted, "but we have to find a way to stop them." Armed with Dr. Whitaker's knowledge, I made my way to the town's water treatment plant. The doctor believed the parasites used the water supply to spread. If I could contaminate it with the homemade toxin we'd concocted, maybe, just maybe, I could stop the invasion. It was a suicide mission, and I knew it. I navigated the dark, narrow corridors of the plant, the toxin sloshing in the container strapped to my back. I heard them, the infected, moving in the shadows, their whispers growing louder. My heart pounded in my chest as I reached the main water tank. Just as I began pouring the toxin into the water, they attacked. Linda, Paul, Sheriff Miller, they all swarmed me, their eyes black and empty. I fought them off, desperate, knowing this was my last chance. Pain exploded in my side as Linda's nails raked across my flesh. But I kept going, pouring every last drop of the toxin into the tank. The world blurred as I was pulled down, their cold hands dragging me into darkness. The last thing I saw was the water turning black, a sign that the toxin was working. I woke up in the hospital, surrounded by unfamiliar faces. The invasion was over, they told me. The toxin had worked, killing the parasites and freeing the hosts. But really? Is it? The town of Windham was no stranger to tragedy, but what befell the Williams family was beyond anything the townspeople could comprehend. When young Anna Williams started exhibiting signs of possession, her parents turned to the church for help. As the town's priest, I was tasked with saving her soul. My name is Father James Morgan, and what I encountered was far from any demonic force I had ever imagined. It began with Anna's fits of rage, her eyes turning a sickly yellow, her voice deepening into a growl that echoed through the Williams home. Her parents, devout Catholics, were convinced she was possessed by a demon. They brought her to me, pleading for an exorcism. I had performed the ritual before. But something about Anna's case felt different, an unease I couldn't shake. Her room was cold, despite the summer heat outside. Religious symbols seemed to have no effect, and the holy water I sprinkled only made her laugh, a chilling, unnatural sound that sent shivers down my spine. I prayed fervently, asking God for guidance as I prepared for the exorcism. We gathered in the Williams' living room, the air thick with fear and desperation. Anna was bound to her bed, her body contorting in ways that seemed impossible. Her parents stood by, clutching rosaries, tears streaming down their faces. I opened my Bible and began to recite the prayers of exorcism, my voice trembling but resolute. "In the name of Jesus Christ, I command you to leave this child," I shouted, holding my crucifix high. Anna's body convulsed violently, and she let out a guttural scream that made the walls vibrate. Her eyes fixed on me, and for a moment, I saw something, an intelligence, a malevolence, that was not of this world. "You think you can save her, priest?" Anna's voice was layered, a chorus of tones that did not belong to a 10-year-old girl. "You know nothing of what we are." As the exorcism continued, I felt a growing sense of dread. My prayers seemed to have no effect. Anna's laughter grew louder, more mocking. Suddenly, she spoke in a language I didn't recognize, her eyes rolling back in her head. The room grew colder, and I felt a strange vibration under my feet. I paused, my heart racing. "What are you?" I demanded, my voice barely a whisper. Anna's head snapped forward, her eyes boring into mine. "We are beyond your understanding, Father," she hissed. "You are the one who is possessed, a puppet on strings." The room seemed to warp around me, and I felt a searing pain in my head. Memories that weren't mine flooded my mind, images of strange landscapes, stars, and ships that defied all reason. I stumbled back. Clutching my head, as the horrifying truth dawned on me, I was the one being controlled. Before I could react, a blinding light filled the room, and a deafening hum resonated through the house. Anna's bindings snapped open, and she floated above the bed, her body surrounded by an otherworldly glow. Her parents screamed, but their voices were drowned out by the noise. I watched in helpless horror as a beam of light enveloped Anna, lifting her towards the ceiling. Her face was serene, almost peaceful, as if she knew this was her fate. I tried to move, to stop what was happening, but my body was frozen, my mind still reeling from the revelation. The light grew brighter, and then, with a final ear-piercing hum, Anna was gone. The room fell silent, the air heavy with the aftermath of the abduction. Her parents collapsed to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. Days passed in a blur. I was left to grapple with the knowledge that I had been an unwitting pawn in a cosmic game. The townspeople whispered of the failed exorcism, of how Father Morgan had lost his faith. But it wasn't my faith that had faltered, it was my understanding of reality. I returned to the church, but nothing felt the same. My prayers felt hollow, my sermons empty. The memory of Anna's abduction haunted me, a constant reminder of my failure. I had faced something far beyond my comprehension, something that shook the very foundations of my belief. As I sat in the empty church, staring at the crucifix, I couldn't help but wonder how many others had been taken, how many others were out there, helpless against forces they could never hope to understand. I prayed for Anna, for her family, and for the strength to face whatever came next. But deep down, I knew I was changed forever. The shadows of the unknown had touched my soul, and I would never be the same. The aliens had won this battle, and I was left to pick up the pieces, haunted by the silent, invisible war that raged beyond the stars. It was supposed to be a peaceful weekend getaway. Mark and I had been planning this camping trip for months, eager to escape the city and reconnect with nature. We pitched our tent in a secluded clearing deep within Red River Forest, far from the nearest town. As the sun set, we sat by the campfire, roasting marshmallows and sharing stories under a blanket of stars. The night was perfect until the sky lit up with a blinding flash. A streak of light shot across the sky, and we watched in awe as it plummeted towards the earth, disappearing behind a ridge with a distant thud. "Did you see that?" I gasped, my heart pounding with excitement. Mark nodded, his eyes wide. "A meteor. It must have landed nearby. Let's go check it out." Armed with flashlights and a sense of adventure, we set off into the forest. The night was eerily silent, the only sound our footsteps crunching through the underbrush. As we neared the ridge, a strange hum filled the air, growing louder with each step. "There." Mark pointed to a clearing up ahead, illuminated by an otherworldly glow. We approached cautiously, and my breath caught in my throat. In the center of the clearing lay a smoldering crater, and within it, a metallic object pulsed with an eerie blue light. It was unlike any meteor I'd ever seen, smooth and symmetrical, almost like a pod. "What is that?" I whispered, my skin prickling with unease. "I don't know." Mark replied, his voice tinged with awe. "But it's definitely not just a rock from space." We decided to head back to camp and return in the morning, but as we turned to leave, the humming grew louder. I felt a strange sensation, like static electricity dancing across my skin. Mark's face mirrored my confusion and fear. "Let's get out of here," I said, gripping his hand tightly. Back at our campsite, things felt different. The forest seemed to close in around us, the shadows deeper and more menacing. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Mark tried to reassure me, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. That night, I barely slept. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, made my heart race. I lay in my sleeping bag, staring at the tent ceiling, convinced that something was out there. The next morning, we returned to the clearing, but the pod was gone. The crater remained, but the strange object had vanished without a trace. "This doesn't make any sense," Mark muttered, pacing around the crater. We decided to pack up and leave, our excitement replaced by a growing sense of dread. As we hiked back to the trailhead, I couldn't shake the feeling of being followed. I glanced over my shoulder repeatedly, my nerves fraying with each step. We made it back to our car and drove home in silence, the tension between us palpable. That night, at home, things took a turn for the worse. I woke up in the middle of the night to find Mark standing by the window, staring out into the darkness. "Mark?" I called softly. "What's wrong?" "They're here," he whispered, not turning to look at me. "They followed us." A chill ran down my spine. "Who followed us?" "The ones from the pod," he said, his voice distant and hollow. "They're watching us." I joined him at the window, peering out into the night. At first, I saw nothing, but then, in the faint moonlight, I saw movement, figures moving silently through the yard. Panic surged through me. "We need to get out of here," I said, pulling him away from the window. We hurriedly packed a few essentials and slipped out the back door, hoping to escape unnoticed. As we crept through the dark, I heard the humming again, louder and more insistent. I looked back and saw them, tall, slender figures with glowing eyes, emerging from the shadows. "Run!" I screamed, grabbing Mark's hand and sprinting towards the woods. We ran through the forest, branches whipping against our faces, our breaths coming in ragged gasps. The humming grew louder, enveloping us. Suddenly, the ground gave way beneath us, and we tumbled into a hidden ravine. I looked up, dazed and terrified, as the figures surrounded us. They were unlike anything I'd ever seen, their bodies shimmering with an iridescent light. One of them stepped forward, and I realized with a start that it was a woman, or at least, it had the appearance of one. "Do not be afraid," she said, her voice resonating in my mind rather than my ears. "We mean you no harm. What do you want?" Mark demanded, his voice trembling. "What do you want?" Mark demanded, his voice trembling. "We seek knowledge," she replied. "Your planet, your people, we have been watching for a long time. Why follow us?" I asked, my fear mingling with curiosity. "You discovered our arrival," she explained. "We needed to ensure you posed no threat." Before we could react, a beam of light enveloped Mark, lifting him off the ground. I screamed and tried to hold on to him, but it was like trying to grasp smoke. The aliens watched impassively as he was pulled towards a craft that hovered silently above us. "Please, don't take him," I cried, tears streaming down my face. "We require only one," the woman said. "You will be safe." The light intensified, and with a flash, Mark was gone. The craft rose higher, disappearing into the night sky, leaving me alone in the ravine. The remaining figures vanished as silently as they had appeared, leaving me to collapse onto the forest floor, sobbing uncontrollably. I stumbled back to civilization, my mind numb with shock and grief. No one believed my story, and the authorities dismissed it as the ravings of a traumatized woman. Mark was declared missing, another unsolved mystery. Days turned into weeks, and life went on, but I was forever changed. I couldn't forget the glowing eyes, the humming, the sense of helplessness as Mark was taken from me. I knew they were still out there, watching, waiting. It was a late summer evening, and I was driving alone on Route 94, a desolate stretch of highway that cut through the barren heart of the Midwest. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the landscape. My mind wandered as the miles rolled by, the monotony of the road broken only by the occasional tumbleweed. I was headed to my sister's place for a much-needed vacation. The isolation of the highway felt oddly comforting, a stark contrast to the hustle and bustle of city life. The radio crackled with static, and I switched it off, preferring the silence. As twilight gave way to night, the stars began to shimmer in the darkening sky. I glanced up occasionally, marveling at the clarity of the heavens out here, far from the city lights. It was during one of these glances that I saw it, a brilliant streak of light tearing across the sky. A meteor, I thought at first, but as I watched, it became clear that this was something different. The light slowed and descended, disappearing behind a distant hill with a soft glow that lingered on the horizon. My heart raced with a mixture of excitement and curiosity. Against my better judgment, I turned off the highway onto a dirt road, heading towards the glow. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. If it was a meteor, I could be one of the first to see it. If it was something else, well, I had to find out. The dirt road was rough, and my old sedan protested every bump and dip. I drove for what felt like hours, the glow guiding me like a beacon. The terrain grew more rugged, and I was forced to park and continue on foot. The night air was cool and crisp, the only sounds were the crunch of gravel under my boots and the distant call of a coyote. As I crested the hill, I saw it, an object resting in a small clearing, illuminated by an ethereal blue light. It wasn't a meteor. It was a sleek, metallic craft, unlike anything I had ever seen. I approached cautiously, my heart pounding in my chest. The craft was about the size of a small bus, its surface smooth and seamless, reflecting the starlight. As I drew closer, a soft hum filled the air, and a section of the hull slid open, revealing a ramp leading inside. I hesitated at the base of the ramp, every instinct screaming at me to turn back. But curiosity won out, and I stepped inside. The interior was dimly lit, filled with strange, glowing symbols and panels. The air felt charged, like the calm before a storm. "Hello." I called out, my voice echoing eerily in the confined space. There was no response, only the persistent hum. I wandered through the craft, marveling at the alien technology. It was both beautiful and terrifying, a glimpse into a world far beyond our own. As I reached what seemed to be the control room, the hum intensified, and the symbols on the panels began to shift and change. Suddenly, the floor vibrated beneath my feet, and I felt a rising sense of panic. What was I doing here? What if the occupants returned? My attempts to interact with the panels were futile, the symbols made no sense to me. I heard a noise behind me and turned to see a figure standing at the entrance. It was tall and slender, with large, almond-shaped eyes that seemed to pierce through me. I tried to speak, but no words came out. The alien raised a hand, and a wave of energy washed over me. I was frozen, unable to move or speak. The creature approached, its eyes locked onto mine, conveying a sense of sadness or disappointment. It reached out and touched my forehead, and suddenly, images flooded my mind, stars, galaxies, and strange, otherworldly landscapes. I felt an overwhelming sense of awe and insignificance. This being had traveled across the cosmos, and here I was, a mere human, fumbling in the dark. The creature stepped back, and the energy holding me in place dissipated. I stumbled, catching myself on a nearby panel. The creature gestured towards the ramp, and I understood it wanted me to leave. I nodded, backing away slowly, my mind reeling. As I exited the craft, the ramp retracted, and the hull sealed itself seamlessly. The hum grew louder, and the craft began to lift off the ground, ascending into the night sky with a blinding flash of light.